Alan Turing. Now, you've probably heard the name, right? Maybe you've seen the movies. He's often called the father of modern computing, even artificial intelligence. But the real story of his life, well, it's one of just staggering genius and absolutely heartbreaking tragedy. To really get a sense of the man behind the legend, we have to look at the incredible contradictions that really defined his life. So, if you go to the UK today, you'll find his face on the £50 note. I mean, that's about the highest honor a nation can give someone. It's a symbol of just how revered he is, a man who helped save millions of lives. But this modern recognition, it hides a really complex and painful past. It's the story of a nation that celebrated his mind, while at the same time condemning the man himself. And this slide just lays it out so starkly, this central paradox of his life. In 1946, he was made an officer of the Order of the British Empire for his top-secret war work, a hero. But then, just 6 years later, in 1952, that same country prosecuted him as a criminal for being a gay man. So how on earth could a hero be treated this way? To figure that out, we have to go back to the very beginning.
Yeah, long before the war would define his public legacy, Turing was a mind apart. He was a kid who saw the world in a way that, frankly, very few people could even begin to comprehend.
His brilliance was matched only by this incredible determination. Get this. When a general strike threatened his very first day at boarding school, a 13-year-old Turing just hopped on his bike and cycled 60 miles alone just to get there. By the time he was 16, he wasn't just reading Einstein. He was figuring out the questions Einstein wasn't asking, going beyond what was even on the page. His teachers, though, they were often just baffled. His headmaster famously wrote to his parents basically complaining that if he was just going to be a scientific specialist, he was wasting his time at a school that valued the classics. At school, he finally found a kindred spirit in Christopher Morcom, who was his first love. They shared this deep passion for science and math, but their friendship was cut tragically short when Morcom died suddenly from tuberculosis. This loss was just profound. It shattered Turing, but it also lit a fire in him, fueling this lifelong quest to understand the nature of consciousness, and maybe even whether a human spirit could somehow be captured inside a machine. And that very quest led him, in 1936, years before the first electronic computer was ever built, to a truly revolutionary idea. He imagined, just in his mind, this theoretical device he called a universal computing machine. The idea was it could solve any problem, as long as the instructions could be written down as an algorithm. This abstract concept, it became the fundamental blueprint for every single computer, every smartphone, every digital device we use today. The paper he published describing this idea has been called just that, easily the most influential math paper in history. I mean, think about that. He essentially invented the digital age on paper before anyone even knew how to build the hardware. But soon, the world would need his genius for something far more immediate and far more deadly. So, when Britain declared war on Germany in 1939, Turing reported to a top-secret location called Bletchley Park. His mission, to break the unbreakable code of the German Enigma machine. Now, what's so incredible here is just how systematic his approach was. This wasn't one single flash of brilliance. He built on some amazing pre-war work from Polish codebreakers to design a new machine, the Bombay, which could just churn through thousands of possible Enigma settings at incredible speed. The first one was up and running by March 1940. And then he invented a statistical technique he called Banburism. I know, it's a mouthful, but it made the whole process exponentially faster, especially for cracking the really complex naval codes. But, success brings its own problems. They were breaking codes, but they just couldn't keep up. They were understaffed, they needed more machines, more people. Fed up with all the bureaucratic delays, Turing and 3 of his senior colleagues did something incredibly bold. They went right over their superiors' heads and wrote a letter directly to the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. And Churchill's response? It was immediate and decisive. He shot a memo to his top general with this now famous order: action this day. The effect at Bletchley Park was described as electric. All of a sudden, the resources they had been begging for just started flooding in. So, what was the real-world impact of all this? Well, historians estimate that the work of Turing and his team shortened the war by more than 2 years. Just let that sink in for a moment. Not days, not weeks, years. The number of lives saved is it's impossible to calculate. He was, without any question, a war hero. Which makes what happened next all the more devastating. The war ended, But Turing's personal battle, that was just beginning. The very nation he had done so much to save turned on him with just unimaginable cruelty. In 1952, Turing was convicted of gross indecency for having a relationship with another man. Homosexuality was a crime back then, and he was given this horrifying choice: go to prison or submit to a year of hormone therapy, a process we would now call chemical castration. He chose the treatment because it was the only way he could continue his scientific work. He wrote these heartbreaking words in a letter about the experience. The treatment had devastating physical and psychological effects, and on top of that, his security clearance was revoked. He was barred from traveling to the United States, and he could no longer work for the very government code-breaking agency he had helped build. 2 years later, he was dead, at just 41 years old. The official ruling was suicide by cyanide poisoning. It's important to note, though, that some historians have since argued that the evidence could also point to an accident, a careless mistake during one of his home chemistry experiments. The truth is, we may never know for sure. For decades, his incredible war work remained a state secret, and his tragic end was just this shameful stain on British history. But, as they say, the arc of justice is long, and in the years that followed, a movement began to finally right this terrible historical wrong. But that journey took over half a century. It wasn't until 2009 that the British government issued an official apology. Then, in 2013, a rare royal pardon from the Queen. And finally, in 2017, the Alan Turing Law was passed, which pardoned thousands of other men who, just like Turing, had been convicted simply for who they loved. The government's apology in 2009 put it so simply and so powerfully. It was a recognition not just of Turing's immense contribution to the world, but of the profound, senseless injustice that he was forced to suffer. So, what can we take away from Turing's story today? I think it's a powerful lesson in how one unconventional, determined mind can literally alter the course of history. It's a stark, painful reminder of the devastating human cost of prejudice. And it shows us that correcting the mistakes of the past, well, it's a long and difficult road, but it is absolutely essential. And all of this leaves us with one final, vital question. Alan Turing's story is an extreme example, of course, but it forces us to ask ourselves, in our own lives, in our workplaces, in our societies today, what potential, what brilliance, what genius do we risk losing when we judge the person instead of embracing the mind?